Welcome. Welcome to the January 18th, 2020 electronic town halls, hashtag e-town halls, powered by We the People, direct voting on our issues. So we moved to fire our rulers, falsely named as our representatives, so we can be enabling people to direct vote on all our issues at the local, state, national, and international levels. OneVoiceNow.org is, there's a How It Works section that we're proud to announce that Benton Harbor, Michigan has been adopting this, where they're getting rid of their mayor and their city council and actually going to start voting directly using public broadcasting apps, all this great technology that we could be voting on our issues, like how our taxes are being done and everything under the sun that we can all unite on, and making the Bill of Rights as not a votable issue, like these sacred rights that we have as far as our culture, our people, that these are not up for vote, but really focusing more on how our money's being spent, how things are happening on our local, state, national, and even international levels that impact us every day. We, the people, are not in control of our government. As you know, the U.S. is not a democracy and never has been. And it's not a direct vote. It's the intention in the revolution from the British Tea Corporation, 1776. However, we have failed. In 2020, we are dominated by so many bloated, wealthy, corrupt corporations doing massive pollution, and they put dollar money profits before profits for our people and our communities. These corporations include the Democrat, Republican parties, Exxon, DuPont, Dow, on and on and on, Starbucks, Walmart, all these companies. The world is a collage of corporations run by these dollar for profits, and our communities are screaming out, crying out for sovereignty and for I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. This is from the famous line from the famous 1970s Network movie. That's one of my favorite movies. We want to welcome to this episode with Sov Amer, and he stands up for liberty and sovereignty for the individual. We've got some simple solutions like what we're seeing in Virginia, where people are demanding ownership and they're looking to, personally, Sov Amer, I'm proud of him that he hasn't had a state ID in 20 years. And it's a really great story to get out there, because I just went through something similar last year. I was in Brazil for 6 months from August of 2018 to February of 2019. Then I went to Cancun, where I did some of the Mayan rituals. I went to the sweat lodge in Cancun, and then I also did Bufu Alvarez and ayahuasca. And part of my journey has been, I have a book out on Amazon called Looking Glass Shattered, Cubicle Commando to Real Democracy Leader. And part of my journey has been to shatter away like the things that have held me back and try to move more into this teaching. And that's why I even do these e-town halls, is like, how they can be useful as a teaching tool. But when I went through all that, when I got back to the US, and I didn't even recognize this country, I went through this horrible airport experience where I didn't even see a human being, and they scanned my passport. And I went through 3 lines that dogs were like checking me out, and we were treated like shit at the airport. It was horrible. And I hadn't been out of the country in a really long time, because I went through some struggles where I couldn't even afford a passport. But when I came back to this country, I'm like, what is this place? And I started thinking, is this just being some kind of George Orwell 1984 nightmare? Is what I feel like this country's, these certain jobs I don't believe should be computerized or go to that. Like, we should have people saying welcome home. I never even heard anybody say welcome home, or any kind of like, oh, glad to be back, or stamping the passport like we used to do. And that's one particular job I definitely wouldn't outsource to a computer or robot. And one of the things we're trying to say too is that AI and technology is great, but let's put a halt to some of it. Doesn't mean we have to AI everything. We don't have to robot everything, and we don't have to technology everything. There has to be some kind of limit to this. And if we had people direct voting, we could have some say, and instead of these representatives who are ruling over us. But I want to welcome Sov Amer, and you've been doing a lot of great work. You're our sovereignty expert. And when I got back to the U.S., I guess I just was going to say before we start, I destroyed all my ideas, and it felt great. I felt amazing. And then I went through this process. I just was in the woods, and I was even chanting, naked in the woods, and doing these rituals. More like a vision quest. I felt called to, because once I stripped all, that's taking these psychedelic drugs. That's what it does to you. It strips away a lot of what, social conditioning and all that. It just strips it all away. So you start getting back to wanting to be near nature and wanting to, really connect. And, this idea of like these massive amounts of IDs. We have these passports, we have these driver's license. I mean, and, it's a lot of money too. And I started realizing, because I started staying in a homeless shelter too in my hometown, Knoxville, Tennessee. And then I started seeing other people. I realized there's a lot of refugees in our streets, because I guess one thing is, why do we even need all these stupid IDs? But then I started seeing all these people who just give up at some point. You're like, I don't want an ID. And, we are surrounded by so many things that do need IDs nowadays, like, getting a hotel room, getting a job, getting married. So many conditioning that we've got to get these IDs. The matrix is always like saying we need these IDs. But so welcome, Sov Amer, and I want to get your take on, this. We're just overwhelmed with IDs right now, and so many people either given up. I've met other people such as yourself who walked away from the idea of having an ID, and then other people are like, just getting the ID, but they're also pissed off because they have to have it too.
Well, you brought up a whole lot of interesting things here, Daniel. But just to go with the ID thing at the moment, I was dealing with that a couple of days ago down at the Capitol, actually. But think about what an ID is. An ID, and everybody says, well, show me your ID. Number one, it's not your ID. It's their ID for you. And everything time you have any kind of an ID, it's something that you have registered for. So once you register, you're giving ownership of the property. In this case, you are the property to whoever you registered with, which in this case would be the state. I think, and I've created, and we do have our own ID that belongs to the people. You are one of the people in theory, or if you choose to be. But yeah, a lot of people are trying to throw off. I'm the only one that I know that has thrown off a despotic government. And that is not only my right, it is my duty of not only myself, but each American to do. And I'm just sitting here twiddling my thumbs, waiting for everybody else to wake up and take their own, what I call corrective action.
So how have you been able to get by so many years without having a driver's license? And what other, is there only certain IDs that you do have and other ones you don't have that you can somehow survive the matrix?
Well, actually, I've got the Sovereign American ID that I've been using for probably about 18 years. And the banks accept it. Now I'm going to tell you, when I use it, it pisses some people off. Okay. But I use it at the bank. I did just a week or two ago. Several times, actually. They're not supposed to take it, but a lot of people don't know. They do anyway. And it's because of the legal thing. The other IDs are what they call legal IDs. So you are at that point a legal entity, which everybody's pretty much correctly calling a corporate person at that point. That's what you're presumed under statute, the legal authority. Well, the people don't have to be legal. The people should be able to establish, it needs to be responsibly done, similar to what government does, but there's nothing wrong with the people getting on the same page. Everybody have the same ID that's created, that you own, that is your property, not something somebody else created for you, where you own yourself. And if you're going to stand up on the sovereignty of the individual, which I didn't make this up, you read the law says that sovereignty in the United States of America is in each and every individual. And that sovereignty is even superior to the federal, state government, or any other entity. Now, the government's not going to tell you that, And they go, oh, well, we have all these little sovereign citizens, which don't exist anyway. But, there's got to be a safe way for you or me or anyone else to stand up and say, hey, we're not doing this anymore. You claim everything about us, our houses, our cars, my DNA, my iris scan, my facial recognition is the property of the state. We say, no, that's not true. And back in 1995, I claimed before all this mess started, my background systems design, computer programming, and everything from satellites to fiber optics or whatever, doesn't matter. But anyway, I reclaimed my DNA, my iris scans, and all data related to me, including this video. It's my personal property. And nobody's asked me for it. So it's all been a fraud, extortion, and a criminal act.
So did you create your own ID, and how do other people in the audience like create their driver's license from scratch? If they want to do the same thing that you've done, how would they go about doing that?
Well, a couple of things about this. I'm not the first one. I didn't know other people had done it. I just did it on my own. And what I did is, yes, I created my own ID. But the way mine was different, on the back of my ID, I actually put the law on there. And I could find it if you want to have another call, find my ID and actually read it. And I've put it on my broadcast. And it starts out with, I am a child of God. This is which is a fact. And within that description, for example, I say I adhere to the 10 Commandments, the Bill of Rights, Declaration of Independence, Bill of Rights, as supported and defended by the Constitution. And I am not required to adhere to any other law than those. And that's the same laws that the government's supposed to go by, it doesn't. And I'll skip around just a little bit while we're at that, because you were talking about representatives, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you be a citizen and you're represented. You're very correct in what I've been saying for over a decade. The people need to take ownership of themselves. And like President Roosevelt said, there are two ways to govern. You can either govern directly from within, or you would be ruled by representatives from without. It can't get any more simple than that. Now I'll go back to your ID. So yeah, I've had my own ID. I've got my own passport, and I've used it in other countries. They don't like it. I've even been to the United Nations. They actually liked it. And on it, in one page, it's got all the technicals, but it does not have a number. Because what do we need somebody else's number assigned to us for? Why do you need a state ID that's got a state number, or a federal number, or passport that's got another number assigned to you? Or you go to a club or a Walmart, why do you need another? They all deny who you are. And all I say is, this is my name, whatever it is. And if you associate it with a birth date, which I would leave off the year, but your month and your year, odds are you're not going to run into anybody that's got the same combination of names and the same birth date to conflict with. And that states who you are. You understand?
So are you able to use your own ID when you go to a hotel room, or if you apply for a job, or get married, or do all these types of things that we do out there in the world, or even to verify your ID when you if they check your credit card or whatever, all these different things that we unfortunately we need a ID for, like, everything nowadays.
Well, yeah, that's true. Well, first of all, when are you going to claim yourself? You can do that any day you want, or you cannot do it. There are a lot of reasons that they ask for IDs. This ID I've got. You either want it or you don't. Yeah, I've been to check into a hotel and some hotel won't take it. Fine, I go to another hotel and they take it.
Mm-hmm.
This is my ID. You either want my money or don't. I'm going to prepay for the night anyway, or 2 nights if I'm going to be there 2 nights. So there's no monetary risk there, and that way the people start taking ownership of themselves, but then they also start requiring not only the politicians, but their servants and people in other companies like a hotel to start acknowledging that this is one of the people. And yeah, we accept your IDs here. Come on. If this place over here demands you to be the subject of a state with a state ID, but we over here say, we don't care. We accept you as the people you are. And people is a lawful term. Okay, then come on in. We're happy to do business with you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I think, we go down this road, like maybe a lot of people don't understand the word sovereignty, but here in Austin, where I'm at, like if you go down to the state capitol, which is in Austin for all of Texas, and you look at the Founder's Stone, it's the Freemasons, and they have these that we're an LLC, and then we're corporate citizens, or we're not really sovereign, people, that we're owned by the state and the national levels, and where things are going. And I think this year is really going to heat up with the protests and everything. But what are some of your thoughts about one of the things that right before John F. Kennedy got assassinated, when he was president, he was speaking out against the Skull and the Bones and the Freemasons and all these secret societies that we see out there, and how from what I can tell, these secret societies all love the idea of us being corporate slaves. I mean, there's nothing free about the word Freemasons from what I've seen. It should be called slavery Masons, really.
Well, you bring up a good point, and something I've been wanting to address for a little while. And so I'll put it out here to all the Masons, Illuminati, or whatever. Bottom line is, you're all people, okay? And I've got a Mason's cap. I've worn it some during my broadcast, and I'm not a Mason. I just bought the cap because I like the cap. Okay, it does make a difference, but here's what I want to throw out to all the Masons, and let's say you're in some other society. You're being snookered. Now, you may learn some things or whatever, but a lot of it is by deception anyway, whether you figured it out or not. But and on the Mason side, they always say, everybody's seeking the light, seeking the light. And some people think that's God. They think it's other things. They never tell you what it is. And some people, and there seems to be some evidence, says the light is actually Satan. Well, I'm not going down that railroad track, but that's an option or a possibility. But what I would tell you, if you had a brain, number one, you have to pay dues to be a Mason, which is fine. Nothing wrong with dues. But you are subjecting yourself to be under someone else. And that's fine. You can do that. But it's no difference from being under a state. But basically, and the big Illuminati and Masons are all over in England. They're the royalty family and a few others. More and more people are learning that. Why would you want to keep yourself subject to someone else? That's why I do this. And if you are a Mason or anything else, you ought to put this symbol over whatever you're doing. Because if you're looking for the light, don't you realize that it's within? It's not out there. So if you're a Mason, you're reading all the books and you're going to all your meetings, and it's always out there. It's always out there. I'm looking for something out there. Right here, it's within me. And it's by law. The law states that each and every one of us in law in America, which applies to all of mankind, by the way, that we are the kings, the queens, the ruler of ourselves, like the law states, with no one to govern but ourselves, meaning I have no subjects, but I do rule myself. And there are two principles I keep bringing up. that are really simple. The people, all we need to do is get on the same page. And I think it's inherent that you know it yourself. You can answer this. One is that you are the sovereign over you, nothing else. You, your house, your property, or whatever, which the state claims, but I'm not going to discuss that right now. But you are the king and ruler of yourself in your domain, whatever that is. And now you need to do it responsibly. The second piece to the puzzle is, or actually the fact, is that the rights of the many are no more than the combined rights of the one. So if I cannot tell you or make you do a thing, the whole state, for example, does not have the right or power to come against me and make me do such a thing. You understand?
Yeah, so the whole state can't, it automatically, people are just giving up their rights with all these IDs and joining these secret societies. It's just giving up. And, we do see a lot of people who are kind of like sheeple or just connected in the matrix and that sort of thing, where they're just kind of just going through the motions of living instead of really living, that kind of thing.
Right, because this is the way we're taught and you're brought up. And there's a lot of good there, like when I was raised, you honored, respected the police, and the police were there to help you, for example. And I'm not trying to pick a bone with police, okay, but I'm just telling you the facts. Over the years, and police have always been corrupt, and I say that just basically, and I'll tell you literally from what I've heard from women, because they were in high school and on through, always hear, you go out on a date or something like that, and, girls or women will talk, and a lot of them had been raped or whatever by police officers. And they tell you that. So, and that's just not police officers particularly, that's human existence. But we have the right and the ability to take back ourselves, and all the rights and powers are within you. You got to stop looking out there somewhere else. And if people would get on, you look all around the world right now, in France and Germany and England and Japan and Australia and New Zealand, more and more standing up against their government because they're forcing immigrants into their country. And yeah, does go back. It's bigger than any one country. So who does that go back to? It possibly goes back to those in these secret societies, the Masons, and the Jesuits and the Illuminati and such. Well, the people are more numerous and have more rights and powers, meaning you can keep your money in your own pocket instead of supporting this corporation over here. The people should be building up their own communication system. We should have, if people had listened to me, 15 years ago, we had had our own cellular company and it had been private, been owned by the people. So instead of you paying, let's say, $50 to $100 a month for a cell phone bill, you'd probably be paying 25 or 35 bucks, and it'd be over your own network. And that means that you would own your own data. Nobody else is collecting all your data. You'd be encrypted. They wouldn't be capturing your video off your phone, but nobody listening.
Well, that's what we're trying to do, is just get the word out, and try to teach people, in these days. I think 2020s are going to be known as the decade of protests and, riots. And one of the things we're trying to do, we took just recently changed this name because I've been doing talk shows. I was with Voices of Global Freedom for a while back in 2014. And also I worked with Collar Davenport, Alternative Public Radio International. So
good people.
I've had a broad spectrum. I've never interviewed Jack LaCrone, but I know he used to be with Collar Davenport at one time. And, so I've kind of been around and I've learned a lot of different ideas and thoughts. And, there's a lot of great ideas out there. It's also like implementing them, and a lot of different activists out there, advocates, or however we want to say that word, all over the world who are, flooding. I think that I've recently I like the word democracy, but kind of the direct vote. You know, I don't know if you've had a chance to look at One Voice Now that David Frank, I did a 2-hour interview with him. I don't know if you've had a chance to see what he's doing, but he's saying that we can use public broadcasting radio and a mobile app and, you know, all this technology where we are voting on these issues, only certain ones though, like property tax, for example, is a great one. Like in Italy, they don't tax your first house. They only tax if you own a second house. So if you own 2 houses, they won't, you know, that's a good example of where it doesn't matter if you're left or right. I think most people in the U.S., if that was up for vote right now, we wouldn't want, because people are getting homeless or kicked out of the house because they can't afford the property tax.
Exactly.
But that could end that. You know, I think most people would agree with that. Like all these other polarizing issues, you know, if we're voting directly, we're not voting for these celebrities or worldwide wrestling. You know, in my hometown in Knoxville, Tennessee, they just elected Kane, who is the WWE champion. He's this giant guy, like 6'8". He's the mayor of Knoxville now. And also, you know, Jesse Ventura and, you know, Ronald Reagan was an actor. And now we have Trump, who is a WWE wrestler.
Well,
well, a little bit anyway on the side, but he did a couple, you know, gigs there.
right. Little cameo appearances.
Yeah. So, you know, it's kind of like if you want to be a representative, become a WWE champion, and that's your path now to be this great politician. But so what do you think about the ideas of direct voting? In some way, each community would have to do it differently, but what do you think of David Frank and OneVoiceNow.org and what they're doing about trying to get away from representative and moving towards the direct voting for all our issues, for a lot of our issues?
Yeah, I've been on that page for a long time. Been telling people you should be able to vote directly. And for example, you know, I rescinded my voter registration, driver's license, everything long time ago. And what I want to point out, that when you withdraw your registration to be a voter, being a subject of the state, that is a vote. It's not a non-vote. It is a vote. It is a vote for lack of confidence in the existing system. It's also a vote for self-government, where you take ownership and responsibility of yourself, just as the law says, and even moral and good practices say you need to be responsible for yourself. On a voting system, you know, my background, system programming and everything else. I've been telling people for over a decade, there's a smart way for that to be designed. And we can all vote off your cell phones or whatever. We can put that in place. It cannot be left up to the state. All of this stuff should be owned and controlled by who? The people. All right, it shouldn't be left to corporations and governments, because the governments these days, until we write ourselves and we write our governance, they do not have the right power authority, in my case, to do most of what they're doing. So, but as far as the voting goes, it needs to be structured as the republic, not as a democracy. And that means, I'm going to extend it further, which I haven't heard anybody doing. That means that even with the illegals, I'm going to say illegals, that's not the right term, but the Latinos or whatever else in this country, they should be able to have a voice. It may not be a counting voice, but why should they not be able to vote? So at least you see what this segment of the population in your own country is thinking and what they want to do. And maybe they have some degree of effect. All right, but it needs to be done from a republic's perspective, again, where the rights of the many are no more than the combined rights of the one. And like I pointed out in Colorado, there was a community had a vote for a tax, as a penny tax. And it just happened to pass. However, surely it was legal. You know, 51% voted for it, 49% voted against it. Okay. What I told them at the city council, I said, y'all just stood up, pledge allegiance to the flag and the republic, and you just had a vote in a democracy. And I said, the difference is in a democracy, the 51% rule. So the 49%. So everybody has to pay this penny. But in the republic, which you took an oath to, and you just pledged allegiance to, what that states in our electing system we're talking about now, okay, the new one that I've already designed, frankly, is that the 51% who voted for the tax owe the tax. The 49% that voted against it don't own it. But it does require what you're talking about. You have to self-govern directly. It's easy to design a system. There's some smart ways to do it so we don't have it perverted. And I forget the name of the programming companies that are writing a lot of the software for the existing voting systems. They can all be hacked. They're all being manipulated. I actually know how a chunk of them are done. And I also know how to design the system so that cannot be done. But yeah, you're right. That is a proper platform.
Well, one of the goals of, once we get direct voting, because like, for example, here in Austin, we have a city manager already, and the city manager, the current one, has been there 3 years, but before that, he was there for 20 years. And so these people that are we got so many layers, and then we have this elected mayor too, and then you got a city manager, and so there's so much bloated. The current the mayor gets $85,000 a year. I'm not sure how much the city manager, but that's money that could be used for homeless shelters or for good things in our community. That money could be used, and not to mention all the city council salaries and all stuff. And I don't think they really work that much too, from what I understand. The city manager does a lot of the work, that's going on. But what do you think of the idea of moving away from having a mayor and a city council and a governor and a president even, and that we're all voting on only specific issues, not things like this more of the sacred issues, or like the Bill of Rights, or leaving some of the things that aren't up for vote? What do you think about that? Like, that we move away from representative, we're just voting directly on the issues.
I think, and I think it needs to be a balance, meaning you still need some people in positions with less authority. So you need to constrain within the rights, while at the same time the people take on more responsibility for themselves. But you still need to have somebody in office who knows what's going on. But you also need to put in protections. So if your mayor or somebody else, the president, it doesn't matter who it is, the county commissioner or whomever, the people can more easily get them out of office, but you've got to be able to cut off the salary from the treasury to those pockets. Okay, so the people need more power and control over their public servants. You need less of them. Now, you're just throwing out some numbers for the mayor and other people. Those, $85,000 for the mayor, that's not outrageous, depending on, and you're talking Austin. Austin's a pretty good sized town, I think. So
well,
that's
it's just
not,
that, I guess one of the things though is, like, we hire the city manager and they get paid money for, they're doing a salary, they're doing a job. The city manager is the same thing as a mayor who is elected. I guess it gets more into, like, should these people, and I just did a video people can go check out, where I was in the city hall and I was talking about how, they put those chairs up really high, like they're the queens and kings, and then the people down in the peanut gallery. I just did a 6-minute short video on this channel about that, where I'm saying, even when you go to a court of law, this judge is like way up high. Why don't they put him down on the ground? Why are we looking up? That's the queen and king kind of stuff, and all that kind of stuff. So, it gets into, like, will we rather have people that are elected, or should it be more like a job? Should it be some kind of election process, or should they be hired? Because hiring is actually a way of electing. If you want to hire someone into some job, whatever it is, you're looking at a different way of doing a government. Hiring versus electing. Yeah.
You're bringing up some very good points there, and I think that to really decide exactly how you're going to design that needs to be an open discussion. I don't think it's rocket science, but again, I think the main theme is you need to put the constraints back on government. And whether you call them an employee or the mayor doesn't really make a hill of beans one way or another, but it's that the people need to retain rights, powers, and controls over their subjects. The other thing about the chairs and all, you're exactly right. Should be level. I worked in a place, big company. Everybody would know off the top of their head, but I had one boss. If he called you into a meeting, even if it was a group meeting, he'd jack his chair up and he'd literally go around the room and lower all the other chairs.
Oh man, I can see that.
So it's just a BS power thing. And the thing is, the power is in the people. The power is within you. But until you get that, hey.
Well, that's a huge point. Is somehow because I guess in my blood and my veins, I've always been de oppresso liber, which is freedom of the oppressed. But then saying we're all oppressed in some form or fashion. I don't think most of us even want to come out of our mother's wombs because we're just crying. Like I think that's really heaven. Like to leave, the real heaven that we can all prove that really exists is like when we were with our mom and just swimming around in the symbiotic fluid and just having a good old time, meeting all our needs, and we didn't have to deal with all this. And then we pop out and we're like, what is this place?
That can be a perspective for folks, and parts of life are very difficult. And just like the yin and yang and everything, and in each one of us, including me, there are pluses and minuses. And just as we won't get everything right, we're not going to get everything wrong. But oftentimes, looking at YouTube or just looking through life, you see people create these beautiful things in art, or you're seeing them start do double backflips on motorcycles, and all kinds of really beautiful and different things. But the one thing nobody's been able to do is be free. Now, why the hell is that? Because everybody is taught that you are the subject of somebody else, or somebody else knows something better than you, or they're smarter than you, or whatever it is. Well, like in law, you cannot be protected and shouldn't be from making your own mistakes. You may have friends and people that try to guide, and that's a spiritual thing, or at least the only spiritual law I've heard of. It is the spiritual world's position to guide. So you guide people in a direction, but you can never direct them and tell them how to go, because that takes away free will. And that's what I try to do on my talks, is show people, and like just talking about the election system. I know how it should be done. I know how it needs to be programmed, but you guide people because they got to have their own free will.
Well, we were inspired, or not just me, a lot. It came from when I interviewed David Frank, and I changed the name of this channel to something simple like E-Town Halls, and that's from when Ross Perot ran for president in 1992. He suggested electronic town halls, and a lot of people.
Did you vote for Ross?
No, I didn't vote for him back in those days.
Oh, you didn't vote for Ross.
But he did get 20% of the vote, what I heard is that he backed down because his life was threatened, and so that's why he had the sale. At first, he had all this robustness to the campaign, and then his sale was shot. Like we know the famous comedian like Bill Hicks, and he talks about that where once his life was threatened, he stopped pushing the electronic town halls, and it seemed like the sale was shot down in his ship towards the end of his campaign, so somebody really threatened him pretty hard that we don't know about him. So yeah. So.
I'm one of the 20% who voted for him. It's one of the last elections I actually voted. Was he a perfect individual? No, but he would have, like President Trump. He's not perfect, but President Trump's doing a lot of things right. I think Ross Perot would have done a lot of things.
go.
Okay. So anyway, like I was saying, Ross Perot did, I think he'd have done a lot of good things, just like President Trump is. But, you know, none of us are perfect, and he'd have gotten some things wrong.
Well, he never really explained during that campaign. Ross Perot never like the details, and that's what David Frank likes to point out. If you go to the How It Works section of onevoicenow.org, I've also been really following Bob Dunsmore. Came up with a great mandate. It's a move on petition where we're talking about cutting the corporation out of the government and regenerative agriculture, and he's got a lot of good ideas too, like 33 mandates. And I'm trying to bring all these different ideas and things, and including sovereignty. You know, how do we go back to sovereignty? And also, I do support a lot of the ideas of anti-federalism, that, you know, we've gotten this big bloated government. You know, in 1871, everybody's talking about how the Civil War wasn't just about slavery. It was also about just destroying state rights. And then from 1871 to 1913, the IRS was created in 1913, and the Federal Reserve, you know, which isn't public. That's a private institution. You know, you and I right now, we can't just walk into a Federal Reserve. We can't go to all these Federal Reserve buildings and just walk in and say, hey, I want to check you guys out. They're secure. You know, they're like boarded up, fenced. You can't just walk in there. They got security everywhere. You know, we want to know what's going on. You know, all of us, we want to be sovereign ultimately. And, you know, the Marine Corps saying is Deo Presso Liber. They say that on their uniforms. That's their motto, the Marine Corps itself. And, you know, sometime maybe back in the 1770s, the Marine Corps was about, you know, really freeing people who are oppressed. And, you know, I guess in some ways, I mean, we got so many things like that, but, you know, so the idea of this show is to be like an electronic town halls, bring all these ideas together, bring these different groups that, you know, have been working for years to try to somehow, you know, where things are going to actually meet up with all the protests. But what are some of your thoughts about like 1871, you know, when we were, unfortunately, we lost our state rights. And I would go so far as to even look at how we can have city rights. I'm not sure what the word would be for that. You know, anti-federalism is to get rid of the loaded federal government, but there should be another one called anti-stateism, I guess, where even the states have too much control. And how do we get it back to cities and local governments, and, you know, get away from, and even the, you know, a big part of it is getting away from the corporations. And a lot of people who are running for office now aren't even talking about nailing the corporations as the bad guy. You don't hear that in any of these campaigns right now. They don't just get up on the stage and say, you know, it's the horrible corporations and what they're doing, and what they're doing for polluting the planet, but also taking away our rights and stuff like that. But, you know, what are some of your thoughts?
You're bringing up a lot of issues right there. 1871 and on. There are simple solutions for all of this. I mean, it's so easy, and it wouldn't necessarily take a whole lot of time to accomplish. You could accomplish so much in 90 days, in my opinion. But the failure on the American people, to a large extent, and is understandable. But like in 1871 and others, and you know, 1933 with the Presidential Act and things like that, where the people lost more rights and they went to Social Security. Now you're a subject of the federal government and all of that, and people are being scammed. All of these things were constitutionally unlawful. So we should be able to correct those errors, because like Keith talks about, those are errors that can be corrected. All right. In the meantime, it's that you judge or whomever, legislate, well, we've been operating like that for 5, 10, 15 years, 100 years, or whatever it is. It doesn't matter. But there are a lot of people, what you're pointing out on your show here, same thing I've been saying a long time. The people have the answers. Okay. But it doesn't do you any good to have the answers unless you take your rights, powers, and authority back. And you can do that like that. It's not magic. They want to make it difficult. And we've got people, well, you fill out these forms with the government, you ask permission of these people in government over here. Why? Because you haven't taken control of yourself. And once you take control of yourself, you're going to get hit from the outside. You're going to take your dings. But I tell you, mentally and everything else, it's so liberating because you are free. You know, you got to fight the little wars and, you know, put out some fires over here and there. But with yourself, you're a free individual. And we can accomplish that together.
I think that where things are going, because I do see a huge financial collapse coming up. I mean, it's not just me; it's a lot of economy, and then we're seeing a lot of climate issues, and you know, so there's a lot of things that are going to really happen. We've already seen a lot of big news, like the volcanoes going off and stuff around the world, and we're seeing a lot. So we're going to be looking at a lot of things that we need more. One of the things I've always been pushing for is more quality in government, because my background is like Six Sigma, ISO 9000. These
Well,
are just,
hold on. I'm going to start interrupting you if you don't mind, because you change subjects and there's a lot of stuff, and you're bringing out important things. Okay, the we need first thing for anybody before you do anything else, even before you have another stupid ass election. Each individual ought to decide and know who they are. Until you get that right, nothing else matters, and it won't. In the meantime, those who are in positions with all the money and power in the corporations, like you're pointing out, are going to take away and destroy everything you've got. So you can take your time, it will never be accomplished, or you can get off your hiney, know who you are, and go from there. Because until you do that, nothing else matters. You're talking about the corporations. Yeah, a lot of the power of corporations needs to be stripped away, and it needs to be returned to the people. But the people aren't ready for that dumbass, and it is a dumbass, simple thing to do and a discussion. But until you know who you are and you actually claim it, you know, you're just being part of the beast trying to fight the beast. Makes no sense.
yeah. Well, I try to stay optimistic the best I can, but you know, like we're all kind of glued to the news, and we're seeing a lot of stuff, you know, even that's coming out now, and as we go forward, you know.
Okay. And I'll just start raising my hand. Uh, a lot of everything that's going on is based on fear. And you look at the Masons and everything else, and there are different perversions in their processes, you know, and it's a little bit by a little bit. They get you to pollute yourself a little bit more, a little bit more. They increase a little bit more fear into you. So you're afraid to do this. Don't better not say you're a sovereign or even use that word, because it's been demonized, and you're a sovereign citizen, and all sovereign citizens are really bad, and they hate cops and they're going to kill and blow up shit and all this stupid stuff. Not saying people don't make individual errors and do some bad and stupid things. I've done my share of bad and stupid things, mostly stupid, not so much bad. But I'll leave it like that. There are plenty easy solutions, and everything you're saying here is on track. But until, do you know who you are? Have you taken control of yourself, for example?
Well, I do admit I felt great when I destroyed all those IDs last year, and you know,
Okay.
trying to take things to another level. I see the merit in all that, and how what that means and everything.
So
See the importance.
what do you need to do, and what's your next step?
Well, I mean, it would be doing that again, but yeah, it's you know, yeah. I
No,
mean, it,
honest question. We're using you as an example, because one day I was sitting there looking at myself. So I ask you for yourself. Right now, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, whatever you have done and haven't done, what is your next step for yourself?
um, I guess just to keep trying to learn about different ideas and things, and connect with different people. I guess is I felt as part of my role is to do these shows. And
Okay, I have a question for you. Why?
why? I guess it's just because my uh, part of my DNA, or I guess my purpose, or like what I'm supposed to be doing.
Okay, great, great. And
Yeah.
a lot of people are doing it for that reason. Let me toss this out that I brought out earlier. And I'm not picking on you, and it's not a you thing. You don't have to answer anything. But what are you doing in what you just said? You're looking out there, just like all the Masons and the Illuminati and everybody else. You're looking out there for your answers. I tell you, your answer's within yourself. You don't have to look out there. So I ask you for yourself, and you don't have to answer, or you may not have an idea, but it should be easy. What is your next step? You just look at yourself is all you got to do.
Well, that's true. I just did a video about that on this channel called World War III, The Matrix and the Ego, and
Okay,
how to
good.
handle the ego, like how much ego should we have? How much should we not have? I think, I don't know if you believe in star charts or things like that, but I was told one time, when I was born, I personally didn't have a lot of stars in my house, so to speak. I guess I've been doing this a long time, like co-hosting these shows and kind of, you know, bringing in people like as a learning curve. I guess I've had a kind of an unusual life, and my nickname is Backpack. Living out of a backpack for a long time. There is a certain amount of dependence, I guess, that I've had to go through, like just living with different people. And even the place I'm staying at now, he's letting me live for free, which is great because it's helping me get back on my feet, because I was almost about,
Good job. Good job.
so I was about to put up a tent and go live under the interstate myself. I was close to that. Some of the things that I've had to go through, and how much things are related to having money, how much money that, I've learned a lot though. I've learned, because I used to make a lot of good money in IT, and, I'm still applying for some jobs that maybe I'll get like a part-time job.
What
But
kind of work did you do?
technical writing, business analysis, and quality assurance.
Okay,
So
okay, understand.
yeah. So yeah, I've just had a long gap in my resume right now because I've been doing all these adventures and different things that,
And go ahead.
yeah. So it happened after my dad died a few years ago. I just felt driven to, try to live a little before I died. But it reaches a point, of traveling. I've just done so much that it's like, there's only so much you can get out of it after so
Okay.
long.
Okay, so what's your next step for yourself?
I just trying to save as much as I can, get in a better place where I could do more, and try. I'd like to see these ideas, like a mobile app, because I'm in Austin, because there's great technology here, to try to build out something real that, people could be voting, that we, like a Twitch app that they have now, or streaming 24/7, because it's my background. I can help put this into reality, so that's kind of these are some of the things I've been pushing for, and going to some of the meetup groups and meeting different people and stuff.
Oh, good for you. Good for you. Okay. Well, just on what we are doing, you and I and other people, all we have to do is come together. We've got the answers. Not only do we have the answers, what I've been saying is we have the rights, powers, and authority, and it's all right here within yourself. You don't have the people. All we got to do is come together. We don't have to be looking out here. We don't have to be looking for government. You want to get away from the corporations, take ownership and control over yourself, and then over your own governance. You self-govern, just like you're talking about. Not rocket science. We could do that if we had the right people together, and not just be the people like you and me and other people that are similar. You could change the whole damn world in 90 days.
That's true, and I guess that's one of the big challenges of all these like groups that are trying to do stuff, and all these activists, advocates, how they can all come together and be on the same page finally,
Well,
somehow.
then you just decide to do it. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. So, yeah, I guess it gets back to that word sovereignty. You know, sovereignty, sovereignty to sovereignty is try to, and that's something I have. What we're talking about right now about really emphasizing that word. We just don't hear that on corporate media or the other media. You know, the important what it is. You know, so you know, how do you define sovereignty? That I mean, you probably already answered it, but you know, what would be the definition of like how we are sovereign? You know,
Well, I'll tell you what the definition is. The definition of sovereignty is this, and this is the legal definition. The decree of the sovereign makes law. What does that say to you?
well, it means I could make the law myself just as an individual.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. The decree of the sovereign makes law. And that means, like Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. How difficult is that? You just say, I am. The other piece to it in law, in the United States of America, it states that the sovereignty resides in the individual and always has. So there you go. Now, no corporation, no government wants you to think that you are free or that you have more rights and powers and authority than they do. But you've got it all. You just got to claim it and act like you do.
Well, keep up the good work, and you know, as we kind of wrap it up here, we're looking at about an hour right now. But what are some of your goals in 2020, and what are some of the things that you're talking about on your talk show called Sov Amer?
Yeah, goals and objectives. I live every day as the free individual I am. I mean, I don't need a goal for tomorrow because I live as I am today, you know, and I'm going to live this way tomorrow. So you retain all your rights, the Ninth Amendment. You reserve all your powers in authority, the 10th Amendment, and you know who you are. From there, you build on the liberty of the individual. It doesn't have to be harder than that.
I just interviewed Christopher Brown, who also has been real active out there as a humanitarian activist. He pointed out that the freedom of speech is our First Amendment and our Ninth Amendment, that they work together hand in hand. Those two amendments, and a lot of people don't know about all these great rights and sovereignty that we already have. We're just not taught these things in school. You know, we're taught a version of history that isn't always right, even because there's other authors like Howard Zinn who wrote about the people's history of the U.S. You know, so there's so much brainwashing over the years that we're hit with, and we got to try to make sense out of how the world works and everything. And
You're right. In one era, a long time, it's only been the last 5 years people have been talking about the Ninth Amendment. Finally, people started talking about the 10th. For 20 years, I put them both together because they have to be. And one thing they do about the 10th, they say all powers reserved to the state, and then they say or to the people. They both pass or to the people. That's the most important part because the states are just as corrupt as the federal government. That's why the powers need to be in the individual people. And remember, people is both singular and plural. But the 10th Amendment can't stand without the Ninth Amendment, all rights. You can't have a power before you have unless you have the right first. So the Ninth, the rights, and then the powers, in both cases, Ninth and 10th Amendment, go to the people. Don't stop at the federal or the state government. You have to take ownership yourself. That's part of the solution you're talking about.
well, we can start inspiring a lot more people when they watch these videos and, you know, check out the show that you do, and people can feel inspired to do the same thing, like create their own IDs. And, you know, we can, you know, use this for inspiration and things that, you know, because I think that, I guess I predict that the traditional government that we have now will collapse. I think, and I'm not the only one that's saying that. I think we'll see that.
I, two things. One, yeah, you're correct on the IDs, but the error being made is on the IDs and people putting different plates on their car. They are rightful and lawful things for the people to do for themselves. You just need to be on the same page and all use the same thing. That's all. If you did that, that would be a huge step forward, but the people aren't listening enough to get on the same page. And that should be a simple thing to do.
Well, I guess we'll keep doing trying to keep the flame going, the torch, of all our souls. We are a lot more powerful than we're led to believe, and all these things that we have right now that are it's not just the corporation, it's also all this self-help stuff and these idea that you've got to be around a guru, or you've got to, like you said, we're always like running for something. A lot of people even go over to India, which at some point I wouldn't mind traveling over there, but it's always searching for something, traveling, going somewhere. You were in South America recently. I don't know if you wanted to talk about some of what brought you there, or you raise a good point that it's like we're always searching for something instead of searching inside. That's a good point.
Yeah, yeah. When I went, I already knew who I was, but I was in a country that refuses to adhere to its own laws. So I went to another country basically I went and talked to lawyers, public officials, and I've been to the United Nations 4 times now, standing up for the rights of the people. And I showed them the law in America. And then I showed them, these are all the court rulings, and said, yeah, that's the law. And they all understand it and they support the sovereignty of the individual. So after a while, I came back. I go, some days you got to go look the devil in the eye. That's why I'm back in my own country, to look the devil in the eye. I am either the sovereign over myself, or I won't say any more than that, but that's the way it is. So I stand up for you. I didn't, like other people, they go away to Brazil or wherever they go, looking for something. I just went to validate what I already knew in myself was right.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, you're the first person I've met that really has taken that word sovereignty and really run with it more than anybody else I've ever met in my whole life. So that's for sure.
Well, long time ago, I saw things were wrong. And I figured it had to be me because I'm the common denominator, right? And then I finally figured out it wasn't me. I was doing a lot of things right, but not only was the problems were out there, but not only that, everybody else had the same problems, just like what you've run into. So I started looking and thinking, and I didn't know what I would find. I said, if I got a dart and I'm throwing at a dartboard, what is the bullseye? I don't know. So I started looking around. What's the bullseye? Is it a 1, a 13, a ABC? I don't know. The bullseye is the sovereignty of the individual. And until you know that bullseye and you are the sovereign, nothing else you do is going to matter. It's literally not going to matter. And even on a spiritual perspective, because you are the light. If you go back to the Masons and everybody, hey, looking for the light, look for the light. Hey, here you are. And I think that's what Jesus, and others have been telling you all along. You are the light. So just live it daily. That's what I do to the best of my ability. And I mess up.
Well, so what are some of the websites and if you want to promote anything like a website or any books or anything like that, or links that people check out to learn more?
Well, we've got our own site. It cranks up and it works fine. I've got a lot of programming behind the scenes, but at SPNWO for Sovereign People's New World Order.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I like that.
I agree there should be a new world order before people started talking about it, because I think the people need to come together, not governments. And I think the world's proven it. It's not the governments and corporations. It's the people that need to come together. And there needs to be a new world order, but it needs to come from the people. Because no corporation, no government's going to create what the people need to do for themselves.
And that's
So
what that's similar to what David Frank's been talking about too, and people can go check out the interviews with him. I just put myself out as a presidential candidate just to see what would happen, but I use these words, and maybe I'll add some more actually. Become ungovernable. That's actually a big campaign. There's a website and a lot of people on Facebook now called Become Ungovernable. And then also like independent, write-in, third party. Because I like all those words because those words are counterculture, more like a George Carlin kind of candidate. But have you heard anything about the Become Ungovernable movement that's getting really popular now?
I've heard the term. I don't know about popularity or anything like that. But yeah, I've heard the term. One thing, let me toss out something that I've stated for myself and see how it hits you. I said, because I've thought about running for office, and in a particular state, a lot of people want me to run for office, and I just never did it. And I'd probably be pretty damn good in office, frankly. But what I've been telling people is I'm standing not in a legal, political sense, but as one of the people, I'm standing as a protector at the state or federal level if people would have me. You can write me in when you vote. You're not going to see my name there. I'll tell you my name later before election. And you could write my name in, but write me in as a position of the people, which is not going to show up on their form. And for you, for example, you're out there in Texas. You could run as the protector for Texas. I think in each state, and this is a position of the people, not something within the legal system, because the people have the right power and authority to be over all governance. So this could be a step in a way. The Declaration of Independence talks about the people need to put in new guards for the protection of their own liberties. So we put in a position called the protector. And there, in every state, there's a state protector, and maybe you have some support protectors or whatever, okay? And then you have one with some supports at the national level. And those can go directly to the government, executive, judicial, and legislative, and start giving them some direction because it comes directly from the people. You understanding?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that type of concept?
Yeah, it sounds good. Like using each state would have their own protector. I guess part of the reason why I put myself out is that my main campaign would be electronic town halls and the 33 mandates that Bob Dunsmore has to like cut corporations from government and get back to regenerative agriculture and sustainable agriculture, things like that, where we get away from Monsanto and the glyphosate that's in our foods and stuff, and all the crap foods that people are eating.
Yeah, exactly. And you're totally on target there. And basically, you're talking about two things. One is you're talking about process. Okay, so this steps out of that process. So you can either sit in there and try to fight the octopus, or you step out as the people who control the octopus. You get me? Mm-hmm. So you step outside as a protector of the people who's over the government, and you start directing the government as the sovereign you are. Sovereigns decree. They do not protest. They do not ask permission. They do not go, hey, mercy, mighty master, may I? The people say, this is the way it's going to go. So you're talking about process, and I think having protectors of the people is a very smart thing to do. And it's lawful. It's not legal. It will never be legal. Legal isn't all that magical anyway, but it is constitutionally lawful, and it's a right thing for people to do.
Yeah, one of the last things as we kind of wrap it up is like, I was born in 1968 and I've seen tremendous changes in my society. We had small business. We used to know like the butcher down the street or the flower shop. It was all small business. And then Winn-Dixie came along, and I put out there in the history of this U.S. is that Winn-Dixie was like the beginning. At least I grew up in Tennessee, where that was the beginning of all this corporation, and that became the Walmarts around. And so I've seen tremendous changes in the last 50 years. And so I guess a lot of the things is, in these days with all the things going on, how we can go back to more of the small business kind of models and collaboratives where, people get to, know each other more and more, just kind of getting back to the future, like that famous movie where they say back to the future, but in the good, not everything was perfect in the 70s when I grew up as a kid, but I have seen tremendous things, all this technology. And I just wanted to also point out that Ross Perot, when he was talking about electronic town halls, he talked about the Usenet, which was shut down. According to my interview I just had with Christopher, he said it was shut down in '94 by Congress, but that was also could have been used for electronic town halls, not informing people, but also so people could vote. But, we have, you and I, we both have seen tremendous changes in our lifetime, and some younger people might not remember all these things that we used to have, around us.
Well, you're totally right. And I think a simple concept is if we just move back toward liberty, as far as governments and all, if people were free, I think the economy would boom, and actually government would end up taking in more money, not less. But you set people free, so you have the mom and pops. I remember in a town that I lived in a lot of my life, here's a lady down the street who ran a nice little store right out of her house. That's all she needed. She did a great job, helped out the neighborhood, and even where I am, you've got to go miles and miles to get to a hardware store. So if I just sell some plumbing goods out the garage or whatever, that'd be a huge service right here. Help me out a little bit. I'd spend more money because I'm bringing more, not income, but I have more resources to spend. And by setting people free, we can not only grow economically, but we grow stronger societies.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. It's great to catch up, and we can always do another interview down the road as time goes by. Send me any links or things that, if you want to send a link to your Facebook group and all the other groups that you're involved with.
Okay, thank you.
Glad to attach that on here, and Happy New Year as we go in. And just, I guess the motto is to, try to hope for the best, but prepare for the worst, And so I've also interviewed a lot of preppers and a lot of people. And part of my journey to be a backpack is to survive in the woods. If the shit hits the fan this year, I try to learn how to live. If you got to go, you got to get, you got to figure out, hope for the best and plan for the worst. So I guess that's the best thing we can do. But have you been also working with some preppers and stuff? I guess that's the last question I'll ask is and some of the survivalists that are out there.
Well, a couple of things. One is instead of hope for the best and pray it is not the worst, I say live your sovereignty daily, like you're free. And my commitment to myself, live each day as if I'm free, even though everybody tells me I'm not.
All right, man. That's a good one.
And as far as the preppers, yeah, I was with some last night, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, there's a lot of good advice out there. People can go check that out. But this is people can go to the website's called etownhalls.com. You can join the movement. You can sign Bob Dunsmore's petition to cut corporations 33 mandates, and also onevoicenow.org. You can check out David Frank, and we're going to be watching Benton Harbor, Michigan to see where it's all going, where they're just going forward with this direct voting, and we'll see how it goes. But thank you so much. Have a great weekend.
Hey, bless you. Have a good one. Thank you, Daniel. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.